So there's lots of different types of .NET projects. So we're just going to take a look at creating a few different ones. So we've already seen this page before, so we can create a new solution here and we get this pop-up. There are various different options here. So obviously you can start with an empty solution. You've got a console application. So looking at this, you've got the solution name and the project name, where you want it to be stored. You can choose whether you want it to be a Git repository, so it'll do a Git init. So you can choose your target framework. So I can choose .NET 9, which I'll do here, but you can choose past versions if you want, including .NET Framework. You've got choice of language, so C#, F#, or VB.NET. Now note that not all of them, if we go to web, it's not got VB.NET here. So these options will depend on what project type you've selected. There's also various other options like not using top-level statements, adding Docker support. You've got advanced settings. So depending on which one you choose, advanced settings might be different. So let's have a look at web, for example, and let's choose web API. Looking at advanced settings, then you've got things hidden away like use minimal API. Now, in my opinion, that's not an advanced setting, whether to choose minimal API or not. So just bear in mind, there are some different options hidden down here as well. And things like web, you've got other options like authentication, so you can get it to automatically add like B2C support, for example. And then you've also got like other options at the bottom. So all these other options are very dependent on what project type you've selected. So these, for example, are related to the authentication settings. So a console application, if I create that, then this is literally just created the console app. So you've got the solution and the project and the program.cs. So this is a very minimal .NET console application. So it's literally just writing hello world. If I go to create a different one, so I do this and then new solution. If we look at desktop applications now, then it also supports like Windows applications, so like WPF applications, WinForms. So Rider does actually have a WinForms editor, so like where you can drag and drop and create the forms and layouts and things. It's got the property tool window, the toolbox window, and all of this kind of thing for quickly editing WinForms apps. So that's all in Rider too. If you want to create a cross-platform desktop application, then you've also got Maui, which can do mobile apps and desktop apps. You do have to install the Maui workloads to do that. For web development, we've already seen Web API, but you've got Blazor applications. You can do Blazor WebAssembly. So the Blazor web app is the new .NET 8. Well, not new anymore. So that's using the server-side rendered stuff. And then you've got if you wanted to do like the older style, and because I've chosen .NET 9, these are grayed out. But you've got Blazor Server, Blazor WebAssembly, these older ones. You've also got things like Aspire. So Aspire is obviously out of scope of this course, but if you've not checked it out, it's fairly new, .NET 8, but go check it out. It's so good. And it's quite easy to add like the app host project or the server defaults project using Rider. Rider also has really good integration for Unity. That's out of scope of this course, but just bear in mind that Rider does support Unity development too. So if we open something else, let's just create a Blazor application. So when you create a project and you've already got an existing project open, you'll get this window. Now, whilst it does give you an option for don't ask again, I would strongly recommend not ticking this because quite often you'll want to choose a different option, this window versus new window, depending on what you're doing at the time. And I'm going to show you in a sec my workflow for opening projects I've already opened in the past. So here I'm going to do this window. So opening up the burger menu and going to open, you do have a history here, but you've got this thing called Manage Recent Solutions. And this pops up this pop-up, and we can see that the previous console app has appeared, and we've got the current Blazor app open we've got here. Now, in the next video, I'm going to talk about hotkeys, but just jumping forward, if I go to File, Settings, and then I go to Key Maps, and then search for Manage Projects. Now, by default, this is unassigned. I've assigned it to Alt, Shift, and P, which you can do here. And what this does is this brings up this dialog we've just seen. And in this, we can do various things. So we can right click and say a new project group. Let's call that Dome Train. And then I can move this to that group. So if I've got different areas of projects, I can categorize them here. And then by pressing that shortcut, Shift, Alt, and P, it pops up. And I can very quickly go to it. And using the left or right arrows, I can choose this window or new window. So I can do new window, open it up, and see how fast Rider is launching that. So if I close that, or I can do Control Shift P and open it in the current window. And that's launched it. So it's a very quick way of switching applications. So as an example, I've kind of cleared this out for recording this course, but normally because I'm a consultant, I've got multiple clients. So I would have a group for different clients and all those client projects within each group. So it means, and it's searchable as well, it means that I can very quickly find projects and jump between them very quickly. So you've already seen there that one keyboard shortcut can speed things up quite dramatically when switching projects. In the next video, we're going to talk about the 3 big hotkeys in Rider that every developer that uses Rider should know. So I wanted to include a video to talk about keyboard shortcuts. There are a few keyboard shortcuts that you should be using all the time if you're a Rider user. So I want to talk through those key keyboard shortcuts. It's also worth pointing out that throughout this course, I'm going to be saying Control and Alt quite a lot. For the Mac, their equivalents are Command and Option. However, for both time and my sanity's sake, when I mention hotkeys throughout this course, I'm just going to say Control and Alt. If you're a Mac user, then just substitute out those for the Mac equivalent. Also, Rider has a few default presets for keyboard shortcuts. I picked the Visual Studio one. If you've picked a different preset, your keyboard shortcuts might be quite different to mine. Again, for both time and my sanity's sake, every time I mention a keyboard shortcut in this course, I can't every time add a disclaimer that your shortcut might be different to mine. The keyboard shortcuts are very discoverable, so you should easily be able to find your equivalent if you've chosen a different preset layout to me. They're also highly configurable, and you can search and customize your hotkeys to suit you. So let's have a quick look at that first. So if we go back to the settings, again, we can use Control, Alt, and S. So this is the preset I mentioned before. So we've got a few options. I chose Visual Studio because I came from Visual Studio, and we can see that because I've made a few tweaks over time, I've not done a huge amount. And if I've made a change, I will mention that throughout the course, then it's made like a copy of it. So that happened automatically when I made the first customization. Here you can search for a command. So for example, in the last video where I searched for manage projects, that's easy to find, and we can see what the hotkey is, which is the one I set up in the last video. We can also click here to actually type a shortcut. So that same shortcut, again, finds that command. The other shortcut we've spoken about quite a bit already is Shift-Shift for find everything. If I do Shift-Shift and manage projects, then you can see, again, in line, it shows what the keyboard shortcut is. So the Shift-Shift is really good for discovering hotkeys as well. So now let's talk about the big 3 hotkeys that I mentioned earlier. So if we start off, I'm going to create a new solution. I'm going to create a web API. And I'm going to open up the controller that gets built. So the first shortcut is Alt-Enter, which is one you'll be using all the time. And again, Options-Enter if you're on the Mac. Now, Alt-Enter does lots of things depending on context. So it's very context aware. You can see in this code, there's a few squigglies. So weather forecast has a green underline. If I put the cursor there, then do Alt-Enter, then we get this drop down with a few things we can do. So we've got like navigation options, we've got changes we can make, but the very top one talks about what this squiggly was. In fact, if we mouse over, the suggestion says convert into primary constructor. So if I Alt-Enter and choose convert to primary constructor, then that has automatically just within that one command changed it over to there. We can see there's another squiggly here. If I hover over that, that says use collection expression, which is a more modern language syntax. Alt-Enter, enter, we can see it's converted it for me. So we can see that these squigglies are really almost teaching me new language syntax as well. And Rider can just do it for me with Alt-Enter. Here's another one. So this isn't a squiggly. I don't have this as a warning, but I quite like expression body members. So this is just doing a return. So there's no need for this to be a return with like the full statement body. So again, context aware, Alt-Enter. I can convert this to an expression body member and it's done it for me. So you can see that Alt-Enter performs actions depending on context, and it does so many different things. Another example, if I add a namespace that isn't used, we can see it's grayed out. So Alt-Enter up here, it says remove unused directives. And with all of these things, you can see there's like a greater than symbol here. So we can choose to do it just this one instance. We can do it throughout the entire folder, the entire project, or globally across the entire solution. So if you're just tidying up and you want to remove all these warnings and code that's not needed, you can make these refactorings across the entire solution, which is very powerful. Another example of Alt-Enter, if I create a new project, I'm going to choose unit test. Now, of course, I'm going to switch over to XUnit and everything else is good. Create. And I go to this test project, which I'm here. We can see that we've got these inline options to be able to run or debug or cover the tests. Because Alt-Enter is context aware, if my cursor is on this line and I press Alt-Enter, then I can do those options from the keyboard without having to reach for the mouse to click. Obviously, there's other ways to run tests. You can run them all together. We'll talk more about testing later on the module. I just wanted to show a few examples of how Alt-Enter can be used in different use cases. This is one of the big three. I will be using this all the time when using Rider and throughout this course. The next one in the big three is Alt-Insert, and this allows you to quickly insert things. So for example, if let's go to a class and I do Alt-Insert, this gives a menu where I can choose some things to insert. Let's go with constructor. And because I've got public properties in the class, it gives me this option. If I didn't have properties or public properties, then it would just do the action straight away. So actually, instead of weather forecast, I'm going to go down here and do Alt-Insert. But because I'm down here, we've now got different options. I can say create a class. Let's call this weather handler. And now if I do Alt-Insert constructor, it's created it for me. And this is really nice because it's left the cursor in the place where I would start injecting dependencies. Another shortcut, if I just delete these three, I can do ctor and then press the tab key, and that does that. But this one leaves the cursor here, where actually quite often if I'm adding a constructor, I want the cursor to be here. So that Alt-Insert, I personally prefer because it means I don't then have to move the cursor to here to inject like iLogger or whatever it is. Other uses for Alt-Insert, so we've seen creating a class, created the constructor. Remember, this also is context aware. So say we go over to the solution. So this has got focus and I press Alt-Insert, then we can choose like a new project or a new solution folder or a new Scratch file. Again, we'll talk about Scratch files later on. You can attach existing folders and things. If we go down to an actual project level and do Alt-Insert, then we get all of these and we can create files and directories and all of these different types of things. So you can see that Alt-Insert is a very powerful command, just like Alt-Enter, which you can incorporate a lot into your workflow to speed things up. And the third of the big three, we've already seen Shift or Control-T, whichever you prefer. And this does everything. I've already spoken about this. There are shortcuts to open these up, but to be honest, I never use those. I always just use all because you can find everything. And as I've mentioned, this includes things like files, symbols, so like methods or properties or class names. You can do fuzzy matching. So for weather forecast, I could do WF to find it. Weather forecast controller, WFC. So I can very quickly find things. I can search for commands, so like commit, build. I can build solution and various things. We can see that commands that have shortcuts are very discoverable here. We can search for things like settings. So if I do theme, I can then go to this setting and it will open this up directly from that Shift command. And I will avoid switching to light mode because that will blind you all. So we'll show a lot more use cases of these three shortcuts throughout the course. In this video, I've just shown a few examples to give you a taste of what they do. Also, obviously, there are a lot more shortcuts than these three, but I see these ones as being the core hotkeys that you'll be using all the time. I'm personally a big fan of Vim, which takes learning keyboard shortcuts to the next level. From my experience learning keyboard shortcuts, my advice would be to pick just a couple of new ones and intentionally start to use those when you're coding. Then before learning any more, first get to the point where you're using those shortcuts subconsciously without thinking about it. Then add a couple more to your workflow, then build up that way. You really want to aim to be using these shortcuts automatically without thinking about it. And doing this makes a huge difference to your productivity when coding.